In our society, we learn how to use things in this world for our benefit. We learn how to influence matter in the way we want. What we don't consider, what we don't learn is how matter influences us, how it influences our consciousness. Okay, you might be aware how alcohol or drugs might change your consciousness, how a certain situation might make you sad, another angry, but on the whole, we don't consider how matter systematically changes or even covers our consciousness. We don't know much about consciousness at all. We are not clear about where consciousness comes from. Now, in the old Vedic scriptures, there is a whole science about consciousness. And it is explained in detail how contact with matter covers our consciousness. Consciousness in its original state is crystal clear. Now, through contact with matter, our consciousness becomes manipulated and gradually more and more covered, until we cannot even experience ourselves as soul. That's why you need a process, a spiritual practice for self-realization. Because in your present state of consciousness, of covered consciousness, you have lost contact with yourself as a soul. Therefore, every spiritual process first purifies your consciousness, and everything else develops from there. Now, while you are purifying your consciousness on a spiritual path, because you are still living in the material world, you are still in contact with matter, you want to avoid that matter again covers your consciousness. For this reason, you have to know exactly how it works, how matter exactly is able to cover your consciousness. You might have heard of the expression Maya. Maya means illusion. It means you are living your life like an illusion, like a dream. You are not experiencing the reality, but you are experiencing a quite distorted kind of reality. We can understand this easily when we compare how two people experience the same situation in a quite different way. Now, it's not 100% different. Otherwise, we humans could not even relate to each other. We couldn't have relationships. We couldn't understand each other. But our experiences can be significantly different. All your senses are imperfect. And your brain is limited in the way, in its ability to process information and interpret it. And your interpretations completely depend on your previous experiences and how you processed those. It depends on your temperament, on your education, on your belief system, on the whole indoctrination that you went through in the society you grew up in. Everything that you perceive, you interpret that through this filter. You see it through a filter. This is what the Vedic scriptures call Maya, illusion, a distorted reflection of reality. The material energy and its illusioning power called Maya, works systematically in covering our consciousness. It consists of 3 different modes called gunas in Sanskrit. Guna also means rope, because by a rope you can control, you can bind a certain thing or person or animal and control it in that way. So these 3 gunas or ropes control or manipulate our consciousness. You have probably never heard of the gunas. It's not part of our educational system. But actually it should be, because only if you understand the principles, how these gunas work, do you stand a chance to understand how your consciousness is being changed or manipulated. Each material mode of nature, each guna, has its own qualities, which are typical for it, which makes it possible to identify them when they appear, once you have understood on principle how they work. The first guna is sattva guna. It is characterized by knowledge, by purity, by balance, patience and tolerance, by a sense of responsibility. A person who lives a simple life, who is non-violent, who acts out of duty, who does things because they should be done for the benefit of all. The second guna is raja guna. Its qualities are movement, a lot of activity, strong motivation, unlimited desires. People are after profit. They are proud. They strongly endeavor to satisfy their desires, to reach their goals, no matter what the consequences are. This leads to suffering ultimately, for themselves and for others. The third guna is called tamaguna. Its nature is dark, inert, lazy, impure, and destructive. People under the influence of this guna tend to stubbornness, to disdain, to violence. They have a tendency for unreasonable, senseless activities caused by stupidity, sometimes bordering craziness. All the gunas are present in this world, always in a mixed form. There is no pure sattva guna, raja guna or tamaguna. It is always just a question which of the gunas is dominating in a certain moment, place or situation. What influence does a dark and dirty place have on you, on your consciousness, with putrid smells and bizarre sounds? How does a place act on you where there is a lot of movement, lots of activities, hustle and bustle, very noisy place? And how do you experience a place that is clean and pure and peaceful, out in nature, with pleasing scents and pacifying sounds? How do you experience food that has been freshly prepared, is tasty, pure, enlivening to your senses? How do you feel when you eat something that is very hot, very spicy, too salty, too sour, very aggressive on your tongue? And what does food to you that is half spoiled, foul, smelling really bad, And now imagine music which works under these basic three different qualities, and what influence that would have on your consciousness. And then imagine associating with people who are under the influence of one of these three gunas, and how that would in turn influence you as a person. All the things that you see, the sounds that you hear, the tastes, the smells that you experience, the character of people you are dealing with, and their words, their behavior, this all shapes your consciousness. All these experiences that you have collected in the past have shaped your mind, your intelligence, and your whole being. All these impressions have shaped your own way to think and to feel. Emotions that come up, preferences you have, tendencies, dislikes you have, and also, without a doubt, the way you express yourself, the way you act in life, your tendency to think and act purely, to be kind, or to be suspicious, angry, bad-tempered, envious, cruel even, or just proud, seeking revenge, or seeking peace, being balanced, being affectionate, the tendency to strive for honor and recognition, for possession and influence, or the tendency to live a simple life, to accept things as they come, to enjoy being in nature, to appreciate relationships, the tendency to be authentic, truthful, correct, fighting for justice, or the tendency to cheat, to hide things, to be treacherous, always planning some intrigue. Your whole being is formed by the gunas. Well, your external being, not your internal nature as a soul. As a spiritual soul, you always remain untouched by the gunas. But your external features, your corporal, your psychological, your mental nature is completely built up, formed by the influence of the three gunas. And this kind of nature, your external being, can always be changed. It is actually changed by all the influences that act on you all the time. If you just change your environment, you will immediately feel different. If you change the people you have association with, you can become a different person. Of course, your whole conditioning, especially your psychological, your mental conditioning, that might take a long time if you really want to see big changes. It depends how you approach it. There are some strategies that can really lead to strong improvement within shorter times. I will speak in a moment about that. What most strongly influences our consciousness is associating with people. And then the next thing is how we feed our senses, the impressions on our senses, the sounds you hear, the visual impressions. the tastes, the smells. And then next is our personal habits, the way we perform activities. And then the content, of course, of our mind, which might be the most difficult to change. Now, each of the gunas has its particular influence on your consciousness. It manipulates your consciousness in a specific way. But the total result of the three gunas, the total result of this illusory energy of Maya, is your complete identification with your material qualities, with your material body, your mind, and intelligence. This total influence prevents you from experiencing your real nature as a spiritual soul. Now, if you really want a strong transformation, then you need spiritual practices. You need spiritual association, and you need spiritual input for your senses. Spiritual input means that what is beyond the three modes of material nature, beyond the three gunas. In other words, that which is on the level of pure consciousness, on the level of the soul, which in its essence is of a spiritual nature. Now, in the same way that you can cover your consciousness by the influence, by contact with material qualities, you can also purify your consciousness by contact with spiritual qualities. Spiritual input for your senses, is that possible? As long as we are living in this material world? Yes, you can feed all your senses with spiritual impressions. And the strongest impression, the most transforming influence on your consciousness is sound. Spiritual sound can elevate your consciousness immediately to a completely different level. It is the strongest purifying force in existence. That's why I want to make this our main topic in the coming weeks. Stay tuned if that is interesting for you.